The shout cracked the air like a whip, louder than the grind of failing tools or the groan of old metal. "Scrap it. It's done." The lead mechanic's voice carried finality. He turned his back, disgusted. His team followed, leaving behind the mud-caked relic, a crippled battle tank whose silence seemed to accuse them all. The flickering lights cast long shadows across its battered hull, a hulk abandoned like a wounded soldier no one wanted to claim. It reeked of diesel, old battles, and disgrace. Welds had split like old scars reopening. The threads of its cannon's recoil chamber sagged like snapped tendons. Years of exposure had pitted the armor's skin, peeling paint away in long strips that fluttered in the fan's draft. Once a protector, the tank now stood inert, its soul buried beneath decisions made far from any battlefield. "Pack up," came the second bark from across the hangar, as tools clicked into boxes and younger techs shuffled out, eager for chow and boredom. This was just another job gone sideways. Nobody saw the quiet defiance in the tank's stillness. No one but the flicker of the overhead lights, and the thin wisp of oil trailing beneath it like a tear. And no one noticed the figure who stepped from the shadows, not yet. Boots scuffed the concrete. Slow, limping, patient. The figure paused at the edge of the pool of light that ringed the tank like a stage set for a last act. He didn't speak. Just stood there, staring. Some machines didn't die with fire. Some died when no one believed in them anymore. But one man had come to remember. Or perhaps to resurrect. He stepped forward, dragging something behind him. Not anger. Not grief. Just purpose. The figure reached the tank and crouched with difficulty, fingers brushing its worn treads as if checking for a pulse. Beneath his coat, the fabric of his pants was dark with oil stains and age. A tremor ran through his left hand as he reached into his jacket and pulled free a folded cloth. Inside, a long-unused wrench gleamed faintly beneath layers of grime. He set it down gently, as though it were a relic. Eli Venn didn't rush. He let the moment settle like dust. He had seen death, and he had seen resurrection. Both began the same way, quiet. No one saw him through the hangar's broad windows. No one called his name. He didn't expect them to. The men and women who remembered Eli Venn had either retired, been buried, or stopped talking. The rest never bothered with the past. But Eli's past lingered in the steel bones of tanks like this, in every bolt threaded under fire, every weld born of desperation. As his hand slid across the tank's weathered hull, memory came back with painful clarity. Not dreams, never dreams, but memory. The kind that waited beneath the skin like a splinter you'd learn to live with. Helmand Province, 2009. The sun there didn't just burn, it branded. And the sand wasn't sand, it was powder that seeped into gears, joints, lungs. That's where the Shadow Bastion earned its name, rumbling through the narrow alleys of Sanjin, its thick frame a wall between Eli's crew and chaos. Each one of them had carved their initials into the inside of the driver's hatch, a silent promise. Eli's was last. He never believed in jinxing fate. He remembered Foster, the driver who sang gospel when the engine choked, and Juno, who could reload faster with a broken hand than most could with both. And there was Torres, the youngest, who carried a photo of a daughter he'd never met. They were crew, forged by heat and held together with stubbornness. One mission bled into the next. But it was the convoy ambush that carved the bastion into Eli's soul. The explosion flung their tank onto its side, burying the left track in a ditch. Smoke filled the cab, and screaming poured through the comms. Eli's arm was shattered, hanging uselessly as he crawled beneath the bastion. He couldn't speak. Could barely think. But he knew the engine. He knew the way its breath caught when the intake was clogged. He had memorized its heartbeat. He rebuilt enough of the intake system with wire, gum, and raw willpower to get them moving. The bastion rumbled upright, bleeding smoke but alive. Foster, coughing blood, took the wheel. Torres never made it home. Eli never forgave himself. After they returned stateside, the bastion was retired, patched up, and displayed briefly before it disappeared into storage. The others scattered, some lost to suicide, others to silence. Eli drifted, haunted. He became a contractor, fixing things the army didn't have time to fix. Fixing things no one asked to be fixed. And now, a cousin of the bastion sat before him. Not the same hull, but it shared the chassis, the soul. Eli could feel it. There was a particular resonance in the old engines, like a voice low in the throat before a scream. And this one was still whispering. He pulled out his tools, some rusted, others pristine. He spread them like old bones before a fire. Slowly, deliberately, he began checking components, ignoring the modern diagnostic gear, trusting instead the temperature of metal, the smell of fluid, the vibration that crept into his skin. He didn't speak, not even to himself. Words got in the way. He found the first fracture near the pump casing. It had been misdiagnosed as a cracked housing. But Eli's fingers knew better. The wear pattern wasn't from pressure, it was from resonance. The mountings were misaligned. A simple fix, but overlooked by those who read numbers instead of feeling machines. He worked through the afternoon, unnoticed. Only when he rose to stretch did he hear the voice. "Sir? Are you supposed to be here?" The girl, no, the young woman, stood stiffly at attention near the doorway, boots too clean, her maintenance log tucked beneath her arm. She looked fresh out of basic, but her eyes had seen enough to recognize the weight of the man before her. He didn't answer right away. Just nodded once and turned back to the tank. She didn't leave. "My uncle knew you," she said softly. "Said you were a ghost." Eli's lips curled faintly. Not a smile, more like the memory of one. "I've been called worse," he said, voice like gravel. She stepped forward, curiosity warring with protocol. "This tank's a write-off." "Not yet," he replied. Then, more gently, "What's your name?" "Private Morales." "Jenna." He nodded. "You ever rebuild a V-12 when the manuals lied to you?" "No, sir." "Then watch." She did. And for the first time in years, Eli Venn wasn't alone. Private Morales stayed longer than she should have, crouched near the tank while Eli worked. She didn't interrupt, not even when the sparks hissed dangerously close to his hands. There was reverence in her silence, the way she tracked each movement of his wrench like a student watching a master. She might not have known the parts by name, but she recognized dedication when she saw it. And more than that, she saw grief. By the time Morales left to report for evening mess, her boots were stained with hydraulic fluid, and the maintenance log she carried remained empty. But her mind was full. The next morning, she filed a request to shadow Eli Venn for the week, unpaid, off-duty hours. The request sat on the lead mechanic's desk for less than 30 seconds before being denied with a red stamp and a scoff. He muttered something about old myths and broken joints and tossed her paperwork in the bin. She retrieved it when he left the office. Eli kept coming back. No orders brought him. No clearance welcomed him. But nobody stopped him either. Most figured he was sanctioned by someone higher up. Others thought he was just another contractor cleaning out the old hangars. He came early and left after dark, always silent, always focused. Word spread among the base's younger crew, the ghost wrencher was real. But officialdom didn't share their awe. Lieutenant Ralston, the operations officer assigned to oversee maintenance flow, filed a formal complaint. He called Eli a risk to chain of command, citing unverified access and unsanctioned activity. He labeled the tank beyond cost-effective repair and reminded command that no registered mechanic had restored so much as a sputter from it. If trained personnel couldn't fix it, why let a ghost chase fantasies? The response came back dry and bureaucratic. Monitor the situation. Do not interfere unless protocol is violated. Ralston wasn't satisfied. He increased patrols near the hangar, tasked Morales with unrelated late-night assignments, and threatened disciplinary action if she kept loitering. She complied by day, but each night she returned, civilian-clothed, flashlight in hand, crouching once more beside the tank. Eli noticed but said nothing. On the third night, she brought a thermos of coffee and sat beside him as he dismantled the drive assembly with almost surgical care. He motioned once, and she handed him the torque spanner without being told. She smiled. "This doesn't feel like a machine anymore," she whispered. "It never was," Eli murmured, eyes focused on a cracked coupling ring. "It's a story made of steel. You just have to learn how to read it." As days passed, more whispers rose. A few off-duty mechanics began drifting toward Hangar 9. Not many stayed long, but enough to seed doubt in the official stance. If Venn really was wasting time, why did the ghost wrencher never stop moving? Why did the tank seem less dead? Some swore they saw the turret shift slightly on its mount. Others claimed the lights in the hangar burned longer, as if recognizing something was changing. But bureaucracy is a fortress made of paper and pride. Ralston pushed harder. He contacted Central Maintenance Command and requested authorization to strip the tank for parts. He argued the space could be better used for newer projects, drones, recon vehicles, tech that didn't leak oil when you looked at it wrong. The authorization came through faster than expected. Eli found the notice taped to the tank's flank one morning. Morales stood beside him as he read it in silence. Immediate salvage order. Unit to be dismantled. 48 hours. He said nothing. Folded the paper and slipped it into his coat. That day, he worked faster than ever. He didn't eat. He barely drank. He muttered to the machine under his breath, not words but syllables, intonations. Like prayer. Sweat soaked through his coat. He removed panels no one else had dared touch, exposed circuitry with a delicacy most reserved for the wounded. He reseated lines, resealed a pump, rewired half the ignition manually. At sunset, Morales came with a sandwich and found him collapsed beside the left tread, eyes closed, lips whispering some half-forgotten tune. She sat down beside him and didn't speak. The next morning, Ralston arrived with a crew of technicians and a forklift unit. Eli stood in front of the tank, hands grease-stained and chest heaving. Ralston smirked. "Step aside, old man." "No. You don't get a vote." Morales appeared, holding up a printed log. "Actually, sir, he does." Ralston snatched the paper, frowning as he read. It was a requisition form, digitally backdated, with a commander's signature. Morales had taken it from her uncle's archive and modified it slightly. Enough to raise doubt. Enough to stall. "You forged this," he snapped. "I didn't. It's from 2011. Field authorization for continued operations on chassis series 1177B. This tank qualifies." Ralston's eyes narrowed. "You're done here, Private." "I already was, sir." The two stared at each other, tension thick as iron. Then the tank made a sound. Not much. A low creak. A pressurized hiss. Then silence. Ralston's face went pale. "What was that?" Eli turned. "The story's not done." Ralston left without another word. That night, Eli replaced the final regulator beneath the engine's manifold. Morales handed him the last bolt. He held it for a moment, then passed it to her. "Your hands now," he said. She tightened it. It clicked into place like a note finishing a song. They stood in the dark together, machine and memory humming between them. The hangar was quieter now. After the confrontation, word spread through the base with the velocity of rumor wrapped in truth. No one officially acknowledged what had happened. Ralston had filed nothing, Morales received no formal reprimand, but something subtle shifted in the air. The engineers gave Hangar 9 a wider berth. Some, out of respect. Others, out of fear that the Ghost Wrencher might actually succeed. But Morales returned each night. Not in defiance. In belief. She no longer sat off to the side, a passive observer. Eli handed her tools now without looking. She knew the order of operations before he said a word. They shared a rhythm, slow, deliberate, wordless. The tank systems, long choked with rust and regulation, began to breathe again. One hydraulic vein at a time. One diagnostic lie overturned by instinct. The schematic on the wall had long since been folded and pinned for reference, but Eli rarely glanced at it. The work transcended blueprints. Eli said little, but when he did, it mattered. "She's not just waiting," he said one night as they crouched over the fuel pump assembly. "She's listening." Morales looked up. Listening for what? He paused, fingers tapping a filter cage. For someone to care again. She thought about that as she sanded the warped bolt housing until the teeth aligned. Her fingers blistered, but she didn't flinch. The days passed. Outside Hangar 9, the world spun on, briefings, drills, rotations. Inside, another world existed. One of purpose reborn from rust and stubbornness. Still, no one clapped. No one cheered. Only one noticed the change. A man named Cobbler, older than most but younger than Eli, had once been a mechanic on armored transports. Now he cleaned floors and emptied waste bins in his late shift role as civilian janitor. He rarely spoke. But for 2 weeks straight, he adjusted his rounds to pass through Hangar 9 after sunset. He said nothing. Just swept the same patch of floor near the tank, night after night, listening. It was Cobbler who noticed the heat first. He touched the tank side one evening and felt warmth, faint, but growing. Machines don't warm on their own. Not dead ones. "You got her breathing again," he said quietly. Eli gave a brief nod. Morales blinked in surprise. Eli had never responded to anyone outside their circle. "You need coolant lines rerouted," Cobbler continued, not asking. "The standard flow loop will spike under pressure." "1. I know," Eli replied. "I still got my kit in my locker." "They never took it." Eli looked at him for a long moment. "Bring it." The next night, Cobbler returned. He said little, but his hands were steady and his eyes didn't wander. With him came Dixon, a wire-thin comm specialist who once rewired a field drone mid-battle, and Grant, a weld tech who'd been benched after refusing to certify a faulty chassis. They all came without being asked. They worked without orders. They believed without needing reasons. Morales watched it happen with awe. The old guard, the forgotten, the written off, the ones who'd been deemed too slow, too broken, too expensive to retrain, were assembling. Each of them had their own history with machines. Each of them had a story no one listened to anymore. But they listened to the tank. And the tank responded. It was subtle at first. The hum of systems when no power was connected. The faint vibration through the track supports. The way the lights in the hangar stopped flickering when the crew gathered. Morales began journaling everything. Not just the fixes and tools. But the unspoken rules Eli followed. The diagnostic tricks that relied more on smell and sound than sensors. She sketched out a new kind of manual, part lore, part logic. Still, the command structure held back. No official support. No supplies requisitioned. Morales bought parts with her own money. Cobbler smuggled fuses from the trash heap. Dixon rigged the software handshake bypass from an old UAV interface. It was all unofficial. All invisible. Until the test. It happened on a night drenched in heat, the air thick with silence. Morales had finished installing the ignition bypass and was bolting the panel closed when Eli leaned against the side of the tank, breathing heavily. His shoulders shook. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. Then slowly turned to the panel on the right. "Time to see if she remembers," he murmured. Cobbler flipped the first switch. The others followed his cues. Dixon nodded. Morales took her place beside Eli. She rested her hand on the tank's cold steel. He inserted the key. The silence thickened. Then, click. A slow whine. A groan. Another click. The engine coughed. Morales held her breath. It sputtered. Then growled. Then roared, deep and angry and full. The hangar walls echoed like a war cry. The tank vibrated as if coming back to life through its bones. Dust cascaded from the rafters. Light flared from the console readouts, green and pulsing. They had done it. No cheer erupted. No one clapped. Eli simply closed his eyes. "She remembers," he said. Morales felt tears press behind her eyes. Not because of triumph. But because she knew. She'd seen it. This wasn't just a machine anymore. It was a monument. And Eli Venn had never tried to fix it for glory. He was trying to give it peace. That night, Morales stayed behind to sweep the floor. Eli sat by the tank, one hand on its track like a father beside a hospital bed. "I think I understand now," Morales whispered. Eli didn't move. She added, "They think you're just repairing steel. But you're tending to a grave." He looked at her then. "No," he said. "Graves don't come back." This was never about mourning. He stood slowly. "This is resurrection." The following morning arrived with a crispness rare for the base. Blue skies, dry winds, the kind of weather that made brass nostalgic and tech crews uneasy. It felt like something was coming. At 0600, Morales was already there, sweeping the hangar floor before the others arrived. Her shoulders were stiff, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, but her mind buzzed with purpose. The tank sat still in the center of Hangar 9, shadows dancing off its newly sealed armor plates. But it wasn't dead. Not anymore. By 0630, Eli returned. He didn't speak. He just nodded once at Morales, like a general acknowledging a fellow soldier. Behind him came Cobbler, then Dixon, Grant, and a few others who had silently joined their cause. Word had reached the ears that mattered. And the ears that didn't want to hear. At precisely 0700, the lead mechanic, Master Sergeant Prell, stormed into the hangar, clipboard under one arm, expression already sour. "I want to know who authorized this," he barked, sweeping a hand toward the tank. That vehicle was decommissioned. It was scheduled for parts recovery, not, whatever this circus is. Morales stepped forward. "Sir." "No, Private. You're not on this roster, and your clearance doesn't cover unsanctioned mechanical activity. You, Venn," he spat the name like acid, "you're not even military. You're a ghost." Eli looked at him, eyes steady. "Then stop being afraid of ghosts." Prell's face flushed. "You've compromised protocol, you've used unauthorized parts, and you've roped others into this nostalgia-driven vanity project." Morales inhaled. "Sir, with respect, this isn't vanity. The tank is operational." Prell slammed his clipboard down on a tool cart. "Operational? That's impossible. The starter was blown. The regulators were shot. The primary hydraulic lines were cracked halfway to hell." "They were repaired," said Cobbler. Prell turned. You're not even on active technician duty. You mop floors." "I used to build chassis for first-line transports," Cobbler said calmly. "Still remember how to thread a bleed valve." Prell paced, teeth grinding. Fine. You want to claim this tank is alive? Prove it. He marched over to the maintenance terminal and initiated a startup diagnostic. It blinked once, twice, then stalled. Exactly, Prell said with a sneer. Your miracle tank can't even handshake. Because she doesn't trust your system, Dixon muttered. Prell whirled. What did you say? She doesn't respond to base diagnostics because I bypassed the OEM firmware, Dixon replied, voice even. The old interface language was incompatible with the upgraded driver mesh. I reprogrammed the onboard software to emulate the 2010 field protocols. Prell blinked. You, what? Rebuilt the interface by hand, Morales added. Using original legacy code and translated voltage tolerances. And I manually rerouted the cooling loop. Prell opened his mouth but no words came. Eli approached the tank. With slow reverence, he climbed the side hull and opened the upper access hatch. Inside, light danced across the console in gentle pulses. He inserted the ignition key. The hangar fell silent. Then, a heartbeat, whir, click, hum, and the engine stirred. The tank didn't just start, it growled. Low and powerful, like a warhorse remembering its name. Prell stepped back. She shouldn't be able to do that, he said. That engine was rated dead. Because the diagnosis was wrong, Eli said. You were treating symptoms. I listened to the wound. At that moment, Colonel Tiernan entered, flanked by 2 aides. His presence was like gravity, every conversation ceased. Tiernan was not a man easily impressed. He'd served in 3 theaters of war, written policy, and retired twice before returning to duty. He had heard whispers of the Ghost Trencher, but this was the first time he laid eyes on him. He stopped in front of the tank, watching the slow spin of its cooling fan. Then his gaze fell on Morales. Private. Did you assist in this? Yes, sir. Under whose authority? My own, sir. You do understand what that means? Yes, sir. Eli stepped forward. She did nothing wrong. If there's punishment. Tiernan raised a hand. I wasn't speaking to you, Mr. Venn. A pause. Then Tiernan walked slowly around the tank, trailing a hand across its surface. He stopped where the name had once been stenciled, barely visible now, scraped away by time. He turned to Morales. What's its name? She answered without hesitation. Shadow Bastion, sir. The colonel looked at Eli. That's yours, isn't it? It was ours, Eli said quietly. Mine and 3 others who didn't come home. Tiernan studied him. Why this one? She's not the same tank. But she has the same heart. The silence that followed felt ceremonial. Then Tiernan turned to his aide. Get a paint crew out here. I want that name back on her side before noon. Shadow Bastion. Block letters. White. Prell stammered. Sir, that's a direct contradiction of the salvage. The salvage order was based on flawed data, Tiernan said. This tank is alive. That means it's active inventory. That means she's ours again. Prell looked deflated. Morales could barely hide her grin. Tiernan stepped closer to Eli, lowering his voice. I remember Hellmand. I remember the convoy that limped back under fire. We all heard stories, but we never saw the man behind them. Until now. I wasn't doing it for stories, Eli said. I know, Tiernan replied. That's why they're true. He turned to Morales. Private, effective immediately, I'm reassigning you to mechanized diagnostics under Venn's direction. Informal title, Apprentice Restoration Lead. Get her fully combat ready. Morales snapped to attention. Yes, sir. Tiernan nodded once and left. Morales turned to Eli, stunned. Is this real? He looked at her with something close to a smile. As real as steel. Together, they stood beside the bastion as the paint crew arrived, fresh buckets in hand. Each stroke of the brush felt like a burial and a birth. That night, as the sun dipped low and cast amber light across the hangar floor, Morales found a folded slip of paper tucked inside her maintenance manual. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakable. Listen. Even silence tells the truth. The name was back. Shadow Bastion, 5 white block letters and a ghost of memory, stood clean and bold across the tank's newly primed armor. The letters gleamed in the morning sun as if the tank itself exhaled for the first time in years. Hangar 9 no longer echoed with emptiness, instead, it pulsed with movement, tools, conversation. Word of the tank's revival had spread beyond the base. Visiting officers dropped by just to glimpse her. A team from Corps Maintenance even drove in from 3 hours away to study the anomaly. They took notes, photos, and samples. None of them truly understood what had happened. They talked specs, blueprints, supply chains. Eli talked silence. Morales listened. The Bastion's full restoration became official just 6 days after the ignition had turned. Colonel Tiernan personally approved reinstallation of her armament systems, non-operational, for now, but symbolic. Not for war, but for reverence. A monument that could still move, breathe, and teach. And Eli was everywhere. Despite a limp that worsened daily and the stubborn tremble in his left hand, he moved from one system to the next with eerie intuition. His body resisted, but his mind, sharp, relentless, pushed forward. He taught without lectures, guided with glances, and corrected mistakes before they happened. Morales kept her journal, now nearly full, each page filled with sketches, instructions, philosophies she couldn't have found in any manual. Every machine lies once, he told her one afternoon. But if you listen long enough, it tells the truth. Morales believed that now. More importantly, she began to hear it. It started when she repaired the secondary hydraulic bypass with only a glance at the wiring. Or when she tightened a misaligned tread plate before Eli even pointed it out. Her hands moved more confidently. Her thoughts echoed with knowledge she couldn't always explain. Ghost wrencher, Cobbler teased one evening, watching her disassemble a stubborn relay with practiced ease. Looks like the curse is catching. It's not a curse, Morales said. It's a language. Cobbler chuckled. Same thing. They weren't alone in the hangar anymore. Young recruits, curious and skeptical, began signing up to observe. Most left humbled. One, a second-year specialist named Kendrick, swore Morales had conjured the tank starter with just a touch. Morales rolled her eyes. It's torque, not magic. But a part of her liked that they believed. What began as a one-man act of defiance was becoming something else entirely. A school. One morning, Morales arrived to find Eli standing outside the hangar, staring into the distance. His jacket was folded over his arm. He looked thinner. Smaller. She knew. You're not staying, she said quietly. He nodded, not meeting her eyes. This is yours now. A knot formed in her throat. No medal. No plaque. Nope. Not even a damn ceremony. He shrugged. That's not why I came. Then why did you? Eli paused, finally turning toward her. Because some things still matter. He handed her a faded ration envelope. She unfolded it. Inside were 6 words, scribbled in blue ink across yellowed paper. Listen. Even silence tells the truth. She stared at it for a long time, then folded it carefully and slipped it into her breast pocket. I'm not ready, she said. You are. With a gentle hand, he tapped her shoulder once, solid and final, and walked away. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to. Weeks passed. The Bastion was officially reclassified as an active preservation vehicle, a term no one had seen before. It wasn't assigned to a unit, wasn't deployed, but she rolled, roared, and trained. Morales took over daily diagnostics. Dixon rewrote her software interface for broader compatibility. Cobbler managed supply chains on the sly. Even Prell, silent and red-faced since the confrontation, sent over a new alternator with no note attached. They all knew what had happened. They just didn't all know how to say thank you. Morales taught workshops every Thursday night, open to any recruit who wanted to learn the old ways. No formal approval. No curriculum. Just grease, grit, and reverence. Her rules were simple. Tools speak louder than ranks. You fix it with more than just your hands. Every part remembers something. Ask it. Don't insult machines by giving up on them. Listen. She hung those 5 rules near the hangar entrance. Beside them, framed and untouched, was Eli's note. The years rolled on. Morales rose through the ranks, sergeant, then staff, then chief of mechanized integrity, a position created largely because of her. She traveled to outposts, trained personnel, restored vehicles long deemed unsalvageable. Her manual, Bastion Doctrine, became standard reading at 3 academies. But she always returned to Hangar 9. The Bastion never left the base. Sometimes they ran her across the parade grounds for visiting brass. Other times, she just sat in the hangar, quiet but humming with presence. Morales insisted no other tank be housed beside her. She doesn't need company, she'd explain. She is the company. One snowy winter morning, years later, a young recruit with nervous eyes approached Morales as she polished the Bastion's rear panel. "Ma'am," he asked, "is it true the guy who fixed her just walked away?" She nodded. Didn't need a crowd. Just needed the tank to remember. And, he was some kind of war hero, right? Morales paused. He was the kind of hero who doesn't wait to be called one. The recruit blinked. Did anyone ever find out where he went? No, she said. Then added, but we know where he was. She tapped the tank's side. That's enough. The recruit stood silent a moment, then saluted. Not to Morales. To the Bastion. Years blurred into routine. Steel was replaced, tech updated, wars came and went. But Morales never forgot. Never stopped listening. Every groan of metal, every uneven spin of a gear, she leaned in. She taught others to do the same. The name Shadow Bastion never faded again. It remained freshly painted, always stenciled by hand. Never automated. One day, as Morales, older now, knees stiff, ran diagnostics with a young recruit, the tank gave a sharp clunk, unprompted. The recruit jolted. "Ma'am, did you?" Morales smiled. "She's just saying hello." Steel remembers.